butchered down into something smaller. And it's hard in a way for a left-wing position to support a state which is so clearly corrupt and so clearly a facade of a democratic process. So then, that leads into all kinds of, extremism and sort of utopian argumentation, which, for example, can land in something like transhumanism or Longtermism. So Longtermism is this idea that, I can't believe I'm even describing this. This is so mad, and there's billions and billions of dollars into this. So Elon Musk and Peter Thiel are invested hugely into this idea that basically, in the long run, we will upload consciousness onto servers. So we have to basically develop the artificial intelligence that will allow us to do that, and then the infrastructure to allow, billions and billions and billions and billions more lives to exist on servers, which they also think will be on terraformed planets that we haven't described yet. And that anything we do now that takes away from that progress is effectively killing millions and millions of people. So every second that we don't act on this agenda to create the long-termist view of a techno-consciousness and sentience, and so that's how they justify this. And of course, it's not at all a different argument from saying which lives matter and which lives don't, which is the same thinking behind a eugenic argumentation, right? We should try and weed out the weak people in society and do like social hygiene and all this fascist ideology. But they're tying it up in this kind of tech utopianism. And there's lots of different interpretations of that. There's lots of people talking now about liberal eugenics, which is to say basically that instead of actively performing a genocide, you simply take people's DNA and you tweak it and you make it better, and then you only breed those kinds of people. And in the meantime, of course, all this technology is increasing climate change, and it's making the global south more vulnerable and more likely to perish as a product of this. But in their reasoning, it's ends justify the means argument, right? So I wanted to also sort of shout out, there's two really great researchers. So Dr. Timnit Gebru, who works with Black in AI, and Emil Torres, who's also doing his PhD in Hamburg. Through the magic of the internet, I'd love to work with you guys. Just want to put that in there. I would put all of these kind of links and ideas in the show notes, so to say, because I know that I'm going across a lot of different subjects, which I'm also kind of fairly new to some of this. But I think it's really interesting, and I'm glad that you pointed it out. Like, well, what's the intention? How do you read intention, right? So when I started Ricochet, the whole point of that book was to try and pick the empirical evidence from the mysticism and the kind of religious cult conspiracy theory vortex of information that's so emotional and plays deliberately on one's emotions, and there's a sort of timeline there. First I'm sort of an Alex Jones kind of guy, and then I become an artist, but I'm still sort of following someone else's agenda, and then I'm like, well, what if I just took a step back? I have some money from the Research Stipendium in Berlin. Like, I had some money. Let's actually get into this, and let's try and distinguish for oneself, not the truth per se, but a mechanism that one could use to interpret between the sort of noise of events. All right. So now we're going to turn a corner and we're going to go down Crazy Avenue, okay? And I probably shouldn't have introduced it like that. But there is a really good example of how we might do this, which has come to light about a month ago. So on 3rd of June, 2023, and this is a new field for me entirely. And actually, it being a new field for me makes it a more valuable way in which I can test my perception of its truth, let's say, and where I sort of find it. So basically, last month there was a whistleblower from the US military. His name is David Grusch. He came forward and presented some information which he had put before Congress. So he went to Congress first to ask if this was okay for him to talk about in public. He's been in the intelligence, very high up, very high clearance in the intelligence of the US military for 14 years. He's a veteran from Afghanistan. I personally think he's quite a believable character. When you see the video, it's on my website, under the essay that I wrote recently, which is called UFOs and the Anti-Rhizome. So basically what Grusch is saying is that he has decided to come forward and reveal certain parts of the US military that capture unidentified aircraft and bring them back to their kind of warehouses, and there's some private contractors, and that, we're not alone, and maybe we should be doing something about this because the technology that these kind of extraterrestrial beings or non-human intelligences, as they're called, could be useful. So he's sort of taking this kind of almost like a sort of geeky utilitarian approach that, like, well, if they've got really good bikes, maybe everyone should have really good bikes. Or, my jacket's really nice, I wish everyone else had a nice jacket. It's a sort of idealist American thing, I think. But when he goes before Congress, that would be the next sort of public moment of all this whole thing. But it's kind of an interesting time. And I wasn't really expecting to be talking about this today, which is why it's not in the press release, but I just felt that it's a pretty good case in point of, like, interpreting information and disinformation and the agendas behind that. So, David Grusch, quote unquote, there are crash recovery units for UAPs, so it's unidentified aerial phenomena. They are co-located across dimensions, so he describes spacecraft which are smaller on the outside and larger on the inside. You guys will interpret all of this, and time will tell whether he is just the most wild disinformation campaign that the CIA ever cooked up. Because obviously there is always this kind of thing of, like, there's got to be some narrative thing that we're all panicking about, so we don't know this, day-to-day capitalism or cultural hegemony or whatever.
Maybe it's just like a teaser campaign for a new movie or TV show.
It basically, what's the difference at this point?
Bought out by Hollywood, in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be the sort of David Grusch documentary gotcha. We will see. But I think what's more interesting, or equally as interesting, is kind of the way in which this has resonated online in the last month. Because, of course, if there really is shift in certain people's minds about the policy that the US military should have about disclosing this information, then it would logically make sense that other people within that institution, or within the various different sort of teams in that institution, would make an effort to release parts, so to sort of leak their experiences. However, I'm not going to speak to any of that because it's not on the record, and it's totally irresponsible to start speculating about the sort of, like, things that have not gone before Congress, things that have not really been sort of said on the record. But I do want to sort of, like, tie a bow on this and come back to the idea of, well, if they are traveling interdimensionally, what might that mean for the sacred day palm tree? What might that mean for these expanding volutes? What might that mean for the nature of consciousness for humanity? What might that mean for our experience of linear time? I think that stuff's really, really rich, and I think that this idea that there are non-human intelligences sort of popping in and out of our dimension, it's not as wild as you might think from a physics point of view. It's established and empirically proven that there are other dimensions. It's established that we are living in one of them, with a certain amount of dimensions that we have, 3, and time. And I think it's kind of interesting to think about what's going on with these gods passing through portals? You know, what's actually going on? I said, you know, I brought this all up with my sort of life coach and spiritual sort of mentor, and it then transpired that she's also a Sufi mystic, and she was like, well, how else do you think they get here? Yeah, all right, how else do they get here? Fine. But let's look a little bit, and this is sort of tie a bow on this stuff, but you know, so some of these sort of rumors then, which are circulating, have discussed this idea that they have a sort of engineered genetics, you know, which is obviously an argument which one could use to produce an argument for kind of liberal eugenics, right? There's this idea, of course, inherent to all of this, that we're going to have, again, like the single genius idea, that suddenly we're just going to have this flash and we're going to work it all out, and it just takes one more bit of tech. No, really, but one more bit of tech. The next bit of tech is going to solve everything. So this is also kind of something to consider when interpreting all of this stuff. You know, there's this kind of absolutism. You know, absolutism and cultishness, they're really part of the same kind of false paradigm, I think. And then there's also the speculation that they are communicating telepathically. So obviously that could feed into an argument around sort of singularity and AI that could easily sort of be manipulated to make an argument for that. And I think also that if certain elements of this capture and recovery and data analysis are being done by private companies, there's also potentially there a kind of underlying argument about privatized space exploration, which of course we're already sort of starting to see. So I wanted to sort of just think about this quote from William Blake, which is, you know, perhaps a nice way to finish, or perhaps to go into some questions. I'm very interested to talk more about the philosophy of change, and maybe what's going on with these kind of expanding volutes. You know, are they somehow trying to convey this idea that consciousness is always expanding, it's always getting more complicated, that there is this linear experience of life that we have, but maybe all of these different dimensions are existing concurrently and also simultaneously, and you could actually pop between different dimensions. So yeah, so as this stuff unfolds, and if you do take an interest in it, I mean, I personally suspect that this will be like the sort of Edward Snowden leaks, that everyone goes like, oh no, but then nothing changes. I mean, Snowden said recently, you know, it's much worse than it was when he was working there at the NSA. So yeah, a truth told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent, you know, and I think that's something to bear in mind with regards to this stuff, simply because there are government bodies, there is a state for a reason, you know. One has a kind of interpretation of life as one lives. Certainly, each individual has to make their own journey, and each individual has to make their own sense of being given consciousness. But that doesn't mean that we should replace the government with crypto. You know, there's a sense of like the individuation of a person and the value of that and the journey that a person is on, without having to be, let's destroy the government and let's destroy all the institutions that are set up to protect us in the first place anyway. So yeah, there's a sort of drop the mic sort of moment, I guess.